Hello everyone, welcome to Limbo. My name is João, and today I have with me Jonas Kilker. So Jonas was one of those dudes that I've connected through Twitter, and I'm not sure how I did it. I just randomly remember having like a Google Doc with one of his final assignments when he was finishing his degree in philosophy around religion and an historical perspective on the on Jesus, and I ended up reading that, commenting with him, and we since then became mutuals on Twitter, and we've exchanged some messages, and I was really looking forward to having him for this conversation. So we talk about a bunch of different things. So Jonas is an actor, and so we went through his acting career and in fact all of his professional career, and how did he end up deciding to become an actor, and how he sees that and how he approaches that, but also how it is to be an actor, but also have a degree in philosophy. And we talked a lot about philosophy and religion. And Jonas does such an amazing job at articulating his thoughts in terms of in the way he actually perceives God is very, very good. Really enjoy it. We talked about fitness. We talked about desire. In fact, Jonas inspired me to write an essay that should either already be out or soon to be out, around the way we relate with desire. Like, we used to want things, and it used to be good for you to want things for the sake of glory. You wanted to be remembered, you wanted to achieve all of these great things. And now it's almost like there's this overlying narrative where you shouldn't want things, that desire is the root of all evil. So we discussed that a bit. We talked about the importance of having like these mythical figures to look for, and to have maybe a renaissance when it comes to movies, and instead of having superheroes, having actual historical heroes as a way to inspire people. So I really, really enjoyed this conversation. All of Jonah's socials are in the description, so make sure you go and follow him. And that's it. Before you go, though, just a quick note on our sponsors for the podcast. The first one, of course, being Contest, the nonprofit that organizes this podcast. The second one being the Socratic Experience. This is the school where I work in. We're in heavily leaning dialogue-based school. We have a very different approach to education. We replace the traditional school from grade 3rd to the end of high school. So check us out at socraticexperience.com. Really good. And finally, the restaurant that actually gave name to this podcast, called Limbo. So if you're in Lisbon, search for Limbo Restaurant and say that João sent you there. That being said, I hope you enjoy the podcast with Jonas Kilker.
Beautiful.
Hello everyone, welcome to Limbo. Today I'm here with Jonas Kilker. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. Is that it, Kilker?
Yeah, Kilker, that's correct.
Yeah, it's interesting because every time that I interact with you on Twitter, for some reason, like, my mind reads your name like Jonas Killer, and I'm like, you're
Killer.
always killing it in the gym, or you're always
Eh,
killing it with like philosophical takes. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Man, welcome to
yeah,
the show. It's so nice to meet you.
absolutely. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, whoa, you do know how to say my name.
Oh yeah, brother. I'm my mom's Brazilian, so I'm half Brazilian.
Oh, oh no, this is like, I'm going to ask you so many, like, you have no idea the pain that it is, because
Yeah,
I work with people from America all day, and like, they keep butchering my name.
they
So the
say they
fact
say
that,
Joao.
exactly,
Yeah,
Joao,
my
Joao.
cousin my cousin just had a son, and he named him Franklin João Freitas.
Wow.
And his mom, his Brazilian mom, was like, "Why would you do that to the kid? Nobody's gonna know his name and know how to pronounce it." But yeah, no, João Mateus. I got
Yeah,
you, man.
that's, man, that feels good. That feels
Yeah,
good, because after so long not hearing my name pronounced correctly in English. Yeah, dude, but yeah, so I mean, we can talk about so many stuff, but I guess that
yeah,
we can start with this. So you were a firefighter. You were just telling me that, while I did some research, I looked into that, and I'm always fascinated by that job.
mm,
I've lived near firefighters all my life. Like, I've
yeah,
changed twice, And so in both of those places, I mean, I've changed more often, but like places that I own, like I've had two houses, and in both of them, I was living very near firefighters. And it's something
Mhm.
that fascinates me. So tell me about that. Like, how did you ended up being a firefighter?
Yeah, so when I finished high school, I had like a 2.1 GPA. I don't know if it's the same in Portugal, if you guys use a similar
No, but I
system.
get it.
I had straight C's and D's. I was not a very good student. I only kept my grades up so that I could play soccer. And once I finished high school, I had no aspirations of going to college. I thought I was just going to be like a blue collar guy the rest of my life. So I got a construction job. I was doing that for like a year, and I was stoked because I was making more money than my friends who were spending all their money in college, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
but then I just reached a point where I felt like I don't know. I had a little bit of an existential crisis. I was like, oh God, what am I doing? Like, this is the kind of job because all these guys that I'm working with, they're asking me like why I'm here. I'm only 17, and when I was 18 years old, um, and they were like, why are you here? You should be go do something else. Try something else first. You can come back to this when you're 30 or 40, and nothing else
Yeah.
works out. And I'm like, damn. So then I was talking to um, my mom, and her boyfriend was a general contractor at the time, and I was asking him like, should I go learn a skill, a trade? Still thinking blue collar. I was like, should I join the military? Like, what should I do? I had no idea because I was like, no college is going to accept me, and I don't even know
Yeah.
what I would want to do with a college degree. I don't care about anything else. I like playing music. I like skateboarding. That's it. So then uh, he gave me the idea. He was like, if I was 18 again, I would try and be a firefighter. And so I was like, okay. So I just decided to just go down that path. I started looking into it, and it turns out it was a lot of work, but something about it was inspiring, and it was probably the amount of money that you can make while only working like 2 days a week, right? So I was like, that sounds awesome. Most amount of money you can make in the shortest amount of time. Um, so long story short, I went to college. I joined an EMT program at my local
Yeah.
community college. Took a couple of months, got my certification, went and took the exam, got licensed. I started working on an ambulance for about 6 months. And all the while, I'm like looking for fire academies, firefighting jobs, wildland fire jobs. And the first thing that popped up for me, said yes, was a wildland firefighting job in the state of Washington. So I said yes immediately. One of my other friends that I was working with at the ambulance station was the one who told me about the job, and we ended up getting hired at the same location.
Oh
So we
wow.
moved up to
Cool.
Washington and lived in a
Awesome.
house together with our two girlfriends. And yeah, it was awesome. It like made me feel very at home. Um,
Yeah.
so I was working this job, and I had gotten like my they call it a CPAT certification. It's like your physical certification for
Mm-hmm.
firefighting. I had done all of the classroom work. I finally got my first job that has the title firefighter in it. I was like, I'm on my way. After this job, I'm like a full time paid firefighter once I get hired.
Yeah.
Um, and something about it just like I didn't like the ambulance job. It was stressful. A lot of it was boring most of the time, which you wouldn't expect, but there's a lot of just sitting around.
Mm,
I couldn't do with the sleep deprivation. It's not for everybody, and it certainly wasn't for
yeah.
me. And I don't know, like it sounds kind of like sometimes when I say it out loud, it almost sounds kind of corny, but I just needed something that was a bit more of a creative outlet, something that like I could let my
Mm,
self expression come out in. And in a
yeah.
job like firefighting or emergency service, it's all service. It's all
Yeah.
I love the human interaction, but it's all just you know public service.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was telling you about my background in music. I was in bands all the way from 15 years old to 20 years old, and that was when I felt my best, was performing on stage.
Yeah.
And so I quit my firefighting job. I moved back home. Um, I started taking just like general education classes at my local community college so that my family wouldn't ask me like what I'm doing with my life. I could just say I'm going back to school. So
Yeah.
then I went on vacation to Brazil with my family to go visit my grandparents, and I was there with my girlfriend, and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have no direction. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And she just told me, she was like, you should try acting or something. It's like music, but you don't have to have four other guys who agree with you in order for you to work. And I was like, that's
Great thinking.
that's great thinking. I literally would have never thought of that in my life. I just like, I
Yeah.
don't know. You didn't think that was for me, So that next semester, I went and took an acting class. The teacher liked me right away. She thought I was naturally good at it. She asked me how long I'd been acting for, and I was like, this is the first class I've ever taken. And so she was just like, oh, I need to do this for you, do that for you. She set me up. She showed me the ropes and like how it works and how the industry works and all that thing. Super great mentor right out of the gate. And she actually had brought me back to her class a couple of times once I started booking gigs and becoming like an actual working actor, to be like a little success story for her class.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
She's says.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny because she had actually like seen a commercial that I was in, and she was like, why didn't you tell me you were working? Like, you need to come back and talk to the class. And yeah. So that was super cool. And honestly, I have to just say, with acting, it's been one of those things that has been a constantly like reassuring venture. Every time that I'm getting down on myself and I'm thinking like, maybe this isn't working out, maybe this isn't right for me, this is just a pipe dream, it's like something else falls into my lap that forces me to keep going. Yeah. And I've just not really experienced that with any other sort of career venture in my life yet. And so I'm still very bullish on it. It's yeah.
What is it about acting that you enjoy the most?
I think the thing that I enjoy the most about acting is the storytelling. I think that it's so cool to be able to create something out of thin air. I've noticed that, even though my entire life I never, ever, like, children dream of being astronauts and they dream of being doctors and whatever, like actors, another one of them. For me, that was just never something I wanted to do. It never occurred to me. But I noticed, like, throughout my entire life, any time that I was ever really inspired by something, any time that I was ever really like motivated to do something big with my life, or like make a huge change, or like cut my hair or dress different or act a certain way, or just anything, like all the very inspiring things that came to me in my life came through movies and TV, And so I realized that the actors playing these characters, I know Brad Pitt's not Achilles, right? But when I see him on the screen playing Achilles, I'm like, that's Achilles, and that's inspiring to me, that story. So then I hold this image of Brad Pitt in my head. And so I realized, like, I know I'm not necessarily revering these actors. I don't revere Brad Pitt. But he is the one who helped tell that story that motivated me, that inspired me. And so I realized, like, I want to be that person for other people. I want to inspire. I want to tell like, there's so many amazing directors and writers and storytellers out there. I like to think I'm an okay storyteller, but there are amazing storytellers. And I want to be the person who helps them tell their stories.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like, I've known a couple of actors in my life, and one of the things that, like, the ones that I really enjoy hanging out with are those that usually they like, as you were saying, like, this is not something that you wanted since you were a child, right? And a lot of times people that have that goal from like the get-go, they become these fucking divas where they're like, oh, no, it's not about the director, it's not about the story, it's about me and my character and all of that. And so the fact that you're coming in from a different perspective where you're like, no, I never thought about doing this, like that, I think that like humbleness is what makes it's what makes it cool. It's like it's fucking phenomenal. And I was talking, I've lived in a house a couple of years ago where I was living in the first floor, and the rent floor was a restaurant and a bar by actually a Portuguese actor. And so he was, and I had a lot of conversations about acting with him because I've always been genuinely curious, and so I asked him a lot of questions. And what you just said was what he kept like piling on. Like, what matters is the story. And if you go there thinking that what matters is yourself as an actor, like, you can be really good, but it comes to a point where the story is more than just yourself, and you need to let go. You need to surrender to that. And so I feel like the humbleness of, I never, like, this was not something that I wanted to. I think the humbleness that comes with that is what allows you for a better role, I would guess.
Yes, exactly. And like you said, it's those people that kind of wanted to be actors since they were children. I've met a lot of actors who like when I meet people on set and I'm like, how long have you been acting? And a lot of them tell me since I was 5 years old, since I was 12 years old in high school or middle school, whatever. It very often like they are cool people, but you
Yeah,
do get those people. Like I've met some people on set that's it's like you could tell they're only here. I don't want to name names, but
yeah, of course.
I've met a guy who told me I was working in a job with him, and I was like asking him, I was like, he was making a joke about being on a TV show. I was like, oh, are you an actor? He was like, no, I don't know what I want to do. I just want to be famous. And I was like, it's interesting. It's like, it's like, I don't care what gets me there. I just want to get there. And it's so weird because like, I've never had that mentality for
Yeah,
a lot of my life. I was like, I don't want to be famous. I just want to have the money that comes with it so I can do all these cool things
yeah,
without having to worry about,
yeah,
getting stopped on the street. I know it's just part of the game at a certain point, but like, it really, yeah, rubs me the wrong way. But the good thing is I have not come across those people the majority of the time. The majority of the time, these people are really cool. And that's
yeah,
another thing that really surprised me about working in Hollywood is like everybody, especially people who have never been to Hollywood, have this sort of preconceived notion of everything you see on the news, everything you see in the media. It's like, oh, these
yeah,
elites, they are this and that. And I can't speak on the elites. I haven't hung out with a lot of them, but I can speak on the people that I am acting with in these, like, smaller films, smaller feature films, short films, commercials, these TV series.
yeah,
And a lot of them are really cool. They're just people who, like me, just love telling stories. Maybe some of them like, being on camera more than others. But
yeah.
at the end of the day, they're just people who are trying to work a job and love their job at the same time.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of the one amazing thing, which is like acting. Like I've done like little bits of acting when I was graduating in music. Like we had like some theater classes and all of that, and I really enjoyed it because I feel like it's one of the only. So when you think about storytelling, there's a lot of ways that you can somehow interact with storytelling, but there's only one way you can embody it, and that's if you're
Right.
acting the story, right? So I
Yeah.
can write the story,
So
like I'm
yeah,
the
you have
creator
taken
of
an
it.
acting class.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
there you go. So yeah, so like I can write the story, and that's amazing. Like all of these characters are coming from my head, and that's awesome. But then
Hmm.
like I need someone to act, even if you're just reading the story, like when you're reading the story, if you're like becoming the character, that's like the most, like that's when you're the highest part of it, I would
Hmm.
say. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's why I was inspired by what you were saying, where like you have these actors that inspire you through their characters, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I feel like we need more of that. I don't know,
Yeah.
like, and you can have a comment because you'll definitely know more about like characters, movies, and TV shows than me. But I feel like you mentioned Achilles by Brad Pitt, and I feel like there's a couple of them that we can look back to. But recently, I've and maybe this is just me, but I feel like there's a loss in like heroes on, like, and when I
Hmm.
say heroes, I'm not talking about like Spider-Man or something like that. I'm talking about like not like these mythical superheroes, but like actual people that somehow embody these values and ideals that we should have as a society. I feel like
Yes.
that's, I don't know. I don't know if do you agree with that? Do you think that that's also true?
Absolutely. Yes, I 100% agree. I think that heroes are sort of being, especially now, like the easiest way to put it is you see somebody who's like, uh, Christian Bale playing Batman, right? And he's like this heroic, like sort of masculine figure that people see and they're like, whoa, like I want to be that. And then like you have like the newer versions of Batman where it's oh, I'm blanking on his name right now, but the guy from Twilight. You know what
Robert
I mean?
Pattinson.
Robert
Yeah,
Pattinson, yeah. And it's like, okay, he's still cool. He's embodying Batman to a degree, but it just doesn't feel the same as Christian Bale. And you're like,
yeah,
why are they doing this? And then you see the same thing with like Spider-Man, and you see the same
yeah,
thing with all these like superheroes that they're just like, it's almost like they're watering them down, you know?
yeah,
Like, Man, I don't know. I have a million like examples of this, but it just seems like one of those things where it's like they're trying to actively program into our heads that you are the hero. Like, don't worry about it. You're doing great. And it just seems like a lot of our culture is just like you're fine where you are. It's this serotonin mentality where there's no drive to continue. There's no drive to become better, to become great. It's like you are that person. It could be you. Don't worry. Like Batman, Spider-Man, they're just like you. Like don't aspire to be anything more. And I think I think that's wrong. I think that we should continue to aspire to achieve like our highest version of ourselves possible. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine. He texted me. This is like random. Woke up to a voice message from him, and he was like, "Hey, I had this thought, and like you're a philosophy major, so maybe you can answer this question well. But what do you think about like the dichotomy between the philosophy of like the disillusion of self and the fact that you have to like absolve yourself of ego and all these things, or should you try and improve your self-image and like build yourself up and become this high vibrating, frequency to all those around you?" And I'm like, the latter. I think the first one's stupid. Why would you want to absolve yourself of ego? Like your ego is the thing that drives you forward, that wants you to succeed, that wants you to, uplift yourself and those around you. And like, it can go sideways, but anything that has great benefits has great consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that idea of high highs and low lows as opposed to just absolve yourself of ego. Life is stagnant. There's nothing. You are nothing.
Yeah.
Like I hate that.
Yeah, I feel like that's so interesting. Because what I feel like, and I have a theory that I want to run
Hmm.
past you, since you're a philosophy major, so you probably know stuff. But
I
like
hope
the
so.
idea that, yeah, the idea that I feel like you need to have a balance between like between because if you keep pushing yourself down, and saying, "Oh, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough." There comes a point where this relationship might become toxic for your own self growth, and it
Yeah,
becomes in itself like this pity thing where you just go down. So I feel like it's important to have some
totally.
kind of level of self acceptance of, well, this is where I am right now, but
Yeah.
but then you need to pile that in with, well, this is where I am right now. Where do I want to go? And I feel like
Hmm.
what happens a lot is, as you were saying, like in culture, in kind of overall message that a lot of people are getting is like, oh, you're just fine where you are. Like you're
Right.
you're perfect there. Just stay there. It's like, okay, that's good. Like, okay, I may feel okay with that, and I may feel happy with that, but where's the growth? Where's the progress? Where's the development? Where's the transformation? And I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of times, and this is something I've been thinking about, where if you have any kind of relationship with spirituality and with God and with the figure of Jesus, and you're like you have a kind of relationship with suffering where you see suffering as a means to an end, like, okay, I can suffer, but then I'll
Right.
get to a point where I'm better. And once
Yes.
again, I'm not saying that like people that don't have a religious background or have a different religious background don't think about this stuff. They probably
Hmm.
do. But like I feel like once you have, because you're so embodying that idea, like you're comfortable with that, with, okay, yeah, I'm not good where I am, I want to grow more because that's what I know. So what are your
Yes.
comments on this?
Yeah.
By the way,
I
if your
think
cat is in trouble, you can go and save him. It's totally
I
fine.
was hoping that you couldn't hear. She's. I have no idea what she's doing. She's literally meowing at nothing.
But that's
Um.
fine. We're very like cat prone
Yeah.
here in the podcast. Totally fine. Don't worry.
She's a little bit of an attention whore. She
Totally
just needs
fine.
attention.
No
Um.
worries.
So my thoughts. I agree that. So the one thing that I think that I've gleaned from Christianity, if anything else, is just this idea that like suffering is not an inherent bad thing, and suffering is just a natural part of life. And I think a lot of people get lost when they start studying like Buddhism or Eastern religions because it at first there is this sort of like acceptance of suffering, and it seems very profound, and in some ways it is, but there's also this like desire to escape suffering, and the only way to escape suffering is to escape all desire and to absolve yourself of ego and to do all these things that, like, I'm not trying to shit on Buddhism, but it's like all these things to just flatline and stagnate life, so that it's like if nothing hurts, then I'm never gonna be in a bad place.
Yeah.
But also nothing's ever gonna feel good either.
Feel good.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so it's like I don't like that philosophy. I don't agree with that. I don't believe in that. And the one thing that I think is profound about Christianity is this idea of your suffering will lead to your greatest version of yourself. Like, not that suffering is good necessarily, but suffering is necessary. And I reposted a tweet yesterday. I saw this thing. It was like, you know, desire is the root of all suffering. Suffering is the root of all greatness. Therefore,
Yeah.
desire is the root of all greatness. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's a it's a fallacy, but it's a syllogism, and it works. And desire may very well be, because if you think about it, like, to bring up Achilles again, my girlfriend and I just watched Troy the other night because she had never seen it before. He's like, his whole journey is based off of the fact that he wants his name to be remembered for eternity. He wants eternal glory.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about anything else. No nation, no person, no war, no king. He only cares about glory. And it's that sort of desire that has caused civilizations to grow. It's that sort of desire that's caused like great men and women to achieve incredible things. Because if they didn't care, because if they were just comfortable with where they were, there'd be no desire to create. And I feel
Yeah.
like that idea of creation is our pinnacle as humans. And there's no creation that occurs without suffering to some
Yeah.
degree.
I even the word glory, that's something that just came to mind. Like we've lost that word. Like I haven't heard the
Yeah.
word glory in so long, and
Nobody
it's like,
cares about glory anymore.
yeah, and it's almost like you're full of shit. Like who do you think you are to want something like glory? Like are you like who
Yeah.
are you to want something like that? But it's like, well, I mean, because let's. I mean, I'm even okay with the fact that maybe I won't achieve quote unquote glory, but it's like, well, but it's the ideal that matters. It's like the fact that
Right.
I'm striving to get there, right? I feel like we've partly lost those values and those ideals. Um, so and let me just go back to
Sure.
as you were saying, like you were talking about the fact that you are a philosophy major. So
Mm-hmm.
how did that, because we went straight from firefighting to acting, but
Oh, right.
there's a
Yeah.
whole philosophy and history part here in the middle of your life, and I want to know, like, how did you get into that?
Yeah. So history was always very interesting to me. I developed this interest when I was probably like my sophomore year of high school. I remember sitting in my world history class and like hearing about everything. I had a really cool teacher, and I think that helped a lot. He made it very interesting. And he just hit all the right points, and he said the right things, and like I just fell in love with history. And from then on, I would watch history videos in my free time, and I wanted to learn about ancient Greece, and I wanted to learn about ancient Rome, and I wanted to learn about all these civilizations, because something about it was so like fascinating to me. The fact that it's not really talked about in the day to day, but it's like the majority of existence has been history, if you want to think about it that way. It's kind of,
Yeah.
and so it was always just fascinating to me. So when I went back to school, and I was going to get a degree, just so that my parents would, not think that I was a loser for quitting firefighting, I was like, I'm going to get a history degree, because maybe I can become a history teacher. And so then I went, started my degree, but in my first quarter, like my first semester at school, I took a philosophy class as a general ed, and I loved it so much. I was like, whoa, I might have to like completely abandon ship and do philosophy instead. So I took another philosophy class just to make sure that's what I wanted to do. And then the rest is history. I switched my major. But because I had started in history, when I got to UCLA, and I had transferred from community college to UCLA. And when I got there, when they were running my like degree audit, they were like, you have a lot of history credits. You could probably minor in this if you wanted to. And I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, you just take more history classes. And I was like, easy. I'm going to do that anyways. Give me the degree. So yeah, that's how that happened. But yeah.
Yeah. So other than most human history has been history, like what is it about history that excites you?
Knowing where we come from. I think understanding why we are the way that we are. It's like I'm still that kid that, when you give them an answer, I'm like, huh, why? I want to know deeper and deeper. And I think that that's where the philosophy comes from too, is because when you get to a certain point, there's no more answers, you know?
Yeah.
Um, that's what I love about philosophy. But as far as history goes, there is so much knowledge you can glean from history, and uh, there's so much, we talk about blood memory a lot in this sort of like space in Twitter. We make that joke a lot, but it's true. There's just some things that are like inherent to you, some things that you are drawn towards, and you wonder why you're drawn towards those things. And then you watch a history video and you're like, oh, my like 27th great ancestor came from this region. That's why I feel called to go visit this place. Um,
Yeah.
and that's why I need to visit Portugal, because like the majority of my genetics actually come from Portugal. Um,
Lucky for
and
you.
yeah, there you go. And it's funny, like people always on the internet, they're always making fun of me, saying that I look like a Spanish conquistador, and I'm like,
It's true.
Portuguese conquistador. Don't get
There
it
you
twisted,
go. There
you
you
know.
go. Yeah.
Um, but I love the study of ancestry. I think it's so interesting to find out where we came from and just understand like what made you you, because you
Yeah.
carry that with you. So I think that that's important.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that happens a lot is that people, and I take this for granted, and that's why I try to surround myself with people like you, where it's like if you're natural curious, I think that eventually you'll be drawn to history somehow. Like it's
Yeah, you have
amazing to,
to.
if you like it's amazing that you're curious about like how like stuff in science and nature works, but even if you're focusing on that, like eventually you'll want to understand, well, how did we come to this understanding? Like, let me go back, and the
Yes,
only way to do that is to look back, is to
to
look at
look through
history.
history. Yeah.
And I don't understand. Like, I feel like there's some things where, like, I was joking the other day with a friend saying that one of the things that we should do is if you have any kind of political comment in like a news outlet or something like that, you should prove, like, you should have credentials that show that you've studied history for at least like 3 or 4 years. Like,
Right.
because a lot of times
That's
people think that they are coming up with the most amazing analysis of something that's happening, or like, oh, I'm so
yeah.
original because this is my thought. And like, yeah, and 200 years ago in Hungary,
Yeah.
exactly the same thing is happening. So shut up, you
Yes.
don't know
Exactly.
anything. No,
Right.
but it's like, yeah, like that focus on history is definitely something that I feel like it attracts curious people, and the same thing goes
Hmm.
for philosophy, I would say.
Yeah, because at a certain point, you're going to be practicing philosophy whether you like it or not. I've had so many people who have like never taken a philosophy class. They ask me what philosophy is, and I'm like, I don't know. And then you just try and think of like a thought experiment. Like trolley problem's a good one. You could ask them where you think that the universe came from, and they're like, "What do you mean? The universe has always existed?" And I'm like, "Did it?" And they're like, "Well." And then now you're doing philosophy. There's no
Yeah,
answer. It's all theoretical. You're just like pontificating, and
yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
So one of the things that I enjoy about your story is like you go from GPD of 2.1 to like writing a beautiful, by the way, paper on
Oh yeah.
the on resurrection. Like, tell me a little bit about that journey as like a student, because I feel like a lot
Hmm.
of time a lot of people would be like, oh, I got these bad grades when I was in high school, so I'll never be able to write that like something beautiful or articulate my thoughts or whatever. Like, walk me through that part of your journey.
Yeah. Um, so when I was in, I think second grade, my parents took me to go get tested for what I now think was like an autism test, but because I was just horrible at school from the jump. It was a nightmare to get me to do homework. I wanted to do like the absolute bare minimum. I just couldn't stand school. So they took me to this place to get tested, and I had to go there every Thursday for a month or something and do all these exercises. And they diagnosed me with ADHD and giftedness, like a high, like very high IQ. And they said that like these two things combined, like it can they can interact in weird ways and just cause a child to just be completely like, like he's really smart, but he just doesn't care about school. He's too focused on other things.
Yeah.
And that's always how I felt. And so then they, all through, I think it kind of put a little bit of like a governor on my ability to succeed in school, because I had this understanding that like I'm weird. I am not good at this thing that other kids are good at. So why should I even try?
Yeah.
And I carried that with me all through middle school and high school. I was like, I'm bad at school. I'm bad at school. I got tested for it when I was 7, 8 years old. Like it's just not my thing. So I'm just fucked,
Yeah.
And, I never tried through middle school. I had poor grades, but that doesn't keep you from getting to high school. And then in high school, I continued to get poor grades. And I remember being told, like, I was like, all my friends were like skaters and, stoners who were dropping out of school or getting sent to the school next door that's like for bad kids, And I was just like, well, like all my friends are leaving too. Like there's no point in me being here. I didn't care about school anymore until I made one friend who made me care about school because he was on the soccer team. I loved playing soccer and I wanted to be on the soccer team too, but you have to have a 2.0. So I started maintaining that at least, right?
Interesting.
Fast forward to when I graduated high school, I was like, thank God that's over. I don't have to deal with that anymore. But then when I went back to school, I kind of like, once I took that first philosophy class, I developed this realization that, oh, I can get through this so long as it's things that I care about. And the cool thing about college is once you finish those general eds, it's all only stuff that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
I also like, maybe it was just in this period of like self-discovery that I had from working construction and firefighting and just like going through a little bit of a period of self-growth that I realized that I actually am smart and I am capable of these things. I just never applied myself. I never tried. So why don't I go back and try? And I have maintained above a 3.8 GPA, like almost a perfect 4.0 GPA all through my college career. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but it wasn't like I was like white knuckling it through it. Like all I had to do was just be very interested in whatever classes I was taking. Yeah. And so that's what kind of led me to, I realized that as long as I'm doing stuff I care about, I can succeed. And I think that I've kind of applied that to all areas in my life where if I have a passion, like if there's a will, there's a way,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like interest and proficiency like walk together, right? It's like, okay, if I'm interested in something, I'll definitely like develop some kind of level. I'm not saying that just because you're interested in I don't know, bowling, you'll be top one player in the world, but it's like you'll develop some kind of skill in it. Okay, so
100%.
yeah, and like, okay, is there anything like in your course that like somehow changed the way you see the world? Because I feel like going through philosophy, like when I was studying in high school, I was doing like this professional course on music, and so we didn't have philosophy, and that was one of my pains. Was like I not that I knew what it was, but I was like, I think that thing has to be interesting. And so when I started to read and study philosophy, like I discovered a lot of ideas that really shaped the way I see the world. I can only imagine, like, if you're going through an actual course. So, what are some of the things that had a profound impact on you?
There were so many things that I changed my mind on once I got to UCLA, especially because the courses sort of became more rigorous. And when I was going to my community college, a lot of it was online. So there was not a lot of like in-person discourse because I started college fall of 2019. So my second semester in school was when COVID started, and then everything shut down. I was online the rest of it. When I got to UCLA, classes were back in person. I started learning a lot from that in-person interaction, getting to actually like shake hands with my professors and have discussion with my classmates. To actually like put a real answer on it, I changed my mind about like almost everything, and I held true to a couple core beliefs, but it just opened my eyes to the fact. Here's the first thing I'll say. One of the first classes I took at UCLA was a class on skepticism and rationality, and sort of this back and forth between what we can absolutely ascribe as being truth with a capital T and things that we will never be able to know no matter how hard we try. And we talked about Descartes for the majority of the class. And one of the things that you read about in Descartes' meditations is he believes that there is this, he's sort of having a back and forth with himself. And he concludes that it is possible that there is this malicious demon or devil or something that is constantly deceiving me at every turn in my life, that absolutely nothing is real. All of this could be an illusion, and it's this illusion that is created specifically for me by this demon, right? And there is no way, aside from me understanding my own existence, cogito ergo sum, like I think therefore I am. Other than that, I can't be sure of anything. And that was one of those things where I was like, you could be sure of some things, But then as I started going through this class and, learning, talking to my professors, talking to my TAs, actually going through the material, not just trying to pass the class, I was like, wow, there's truth to that. You can't be certain of literally anything. And that was one of the first things that I changed my mind about in the class. I remember the TA had us like in a discussion section, and he was like, so tomorrow's the last day of class. I wanted to ask, has anybody changed their mind on anything? Has anybody learned anything from this? And my hand shot up. I was like, yeah, I believe that he's right. Like, you can't be certain of anything. Like, yeah. Pure skepticism, And then he's like, oh, it's awesome. And then it sparked a huge classroom conversation because like a lot of these people who weren't philosophy majors, they were just taking the class as a general ed. They were like, well, no, I need to be certain about some things. I need to know that when I wake up in the morning and start my car is not going to explode. It's just going to start. And I'm like, but you don't know that.
Yeah.
You don't know that you're going to wake up tomorrow. You don't know that when you wake up and you put your feet on the floor, you're not going to fall through the floor. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that you just accept as truth, but you don't know. You can't. And that was one of the first really interesting things that I think was a great introduction, kind of opened my eyes to like how deep this goes. But yeah, I don't know. There are a million things I changed my mind on.
Yeah, I bet that's a good example because I feel like I remember reading meditations and like I don't know, it's one of those things that I feel like sometimes happens when you go through philosophy and you read a book or you discuss a book and you're like, okay, you grasp the concept,
mm-hmm.
and you feel like the whole depth of it, and that's so scary that eventually you compartmentalize it into like I know this, but I'm not thinking about it in my day-to-day life just so I can like operate.
I can't feel it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because then you'd have like, because that's my question is that, like, if you're feeling that, if you're like looking at the world through those lenses, like how do you deal with so much uncertainty?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of people might not be equipped with dealing with uncertainty on that
And
end.
they're not, and that's the thing that separates people from people who like philosophy and don't like philosophy. I've heard people say like, oh, I don't like philosophy because I'm bad at it. And I'm like, you're not bad at it. You probably just don't have that, like I said, like capacity to allow, or like you said, that capacity to allow your reality to be like shattered and be okay, because in all honesty, you have to sometimes allow some things that you held as a core truth to be broken down, even if it's just to piece it back together again properly. You know what I mean?
That way you actually know what it means, because it was like this loosely held idea that now has been broken up and has been built from bottom up, and now it's like way stronger. I feel like one of the things that I wasn't ready at all to do that while I was growing up. Then when I got into spirituality, like I started to question everything, and then when I started dating with my girlfriend, she's a natural philosopher, and like it's so, and it would be like she would, like I would just spit out these things that I consider absolute truth, and she was like, "Well, why is that?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean why, right? Then we'll have
Yeah,
all of
it's
these
an
back and
inherent
forth.
truth. Yeah.
Exactly, and he's like, no, it's not. And so, yeah, I feel like that dealing with uncertainty is definitely something that's interesting. And I feel like for me, at least, like the way I've coped with all of these different things is just to go back to like one or two fundamental truths. And I mean, one of them, and I'm willing to accept this, is that
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a God or not, but I do know that I feel it. And so,
Right.
because I know myself and I know that I'm feeling this, well, then okay, I feel like this is a good
Mhm.
belief to have. And so,
Yes.
and that gets me to like religion, I guess, and like your relationship with it. Like, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into relationship and then how that changed, or
Mhm.
if changed, while going through the philosophy course.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I want to say is I know that this is gonna it'll bother some Christians. I think other Christians will understand, but I think that to say that you know for certain that God exists is not only untrue, but it's unbiblical because I think that it's the entire purpose of faith, right? Because if you know something
Mm-hmm.
for certain, you don't have to have faith in it. And I think in order to have faith, there has to be a grain of uncertainty. And
Yeah.
so I have accepted from very early on because, like you were talking about my band, I wrote a ton of songs when I was in high school before I even like read the Bible about how I don't know if God exists. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I didn't even read the Bible yet, but I'm already like thinking about these things of like, I grew up in a Christian household and now I'm questioning it and like I have to write
Yeah.
an angsty song about it. Um, but it's one of those things that I never put that pressure on myself to like know for certain whether or not God exists because it's
Yeah.
just not possible. But I think that that's an important piece of it is that it's not supposed to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've always allowed myself that fluidity, and so as I was going into this philosophy course, I remember talking to somebody who was a youth pastor at the church that I went to when I was a teenager, um, and he was like, be careful because they're going to try and change your mind on this and they're going to try and I'm like, well, good. Like, they as they should. It's important for that to happen as we grow,
Yeah.
especially as Christians. You got to be challenged. Um, and I think I've always opened myself to the possibility of God being different than what I imagine he is, of God being different than your first, second, third, fourth, fifth interpretation of the Bible as you're reading it. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
never know for certain, and that's okay. Uh, so I'm very open to a lot of things that I think a lot of Christians would see as maybe heretical, but
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I think that's something similar happened when I was like when I started to get into, because I was also brought up in a Catholic
Hmm.
household, and I went to college and questioning all of that, like reading books from all of these different religions, and that was the first time when I was like, well, you know what, maybe God isn't like this like old man with a beard, right? Like the kind
Hmm.
of thing that we have. Maybe it's like an entity that I I cannot understand, and it
Yeah.
may come in various different forms. And I feel like and I've held like the certainty that I have is not that um it's not even that God exists, is that I feel God. Like, and
Right.
I feel like and that's something that I can, and once again, what is God? Maybe it's just like
It might
synapses in my
change.
brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it definitely it has changed. It keeps
Yeah.
changing.
But it's
But I
always
feel like
God.
exactly, and I call it
Yeah.
that word because that word encapsulates all of these ideas that I have about that particular entity.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did yeah? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say like, and that's why I think that it's so. If you were to take all the problem with Christianity is this. Sorry, I was trying to put my thoughts together. A lot of Christians rely on if it's not in the Bible, it's not true. And I think that that's just absolutely insane. First of all,
Mm,
because the Bible was put together by church councils in
yeah.
the fourth century AD, and there was a lot of stuff that happened beforehand. There was a lot of stuff that happened after. Um, if you were to take all of the actual stories and writings and histories, things that are true about God, and put them into one book, the book would be larger than the entire world could possibly contain. It's because God is literally like in everything, a part of everything, the creator of everything. So to be able to put all of it into one book and say that, God, the real one true God, is the God of the Bible, but he's not the God that they are referencing in this ancient, scripture from some faraway land. It's like, why not? How do you
Yeah.
know? Just because
Yeah.
it wasn't put together by the Council of Nicaea? Like, that's the
Yeah.
only thing that you're using as what God is and what God isn't.
Justification. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think recently I've been so attracted to Eastern Orthodoxy Christianity, because they like to focus a lot on what God isn't as opposed to what God is. Because what God is so vast that it's almost
Yeah.
easier to compartmentalize uh, what God is not. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's a great approach. I never thought about it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did you get like you told me a story before we were recording about how you went from once again like being like questioning and then actually like going deep into the Bible and into your relationship with God. And I want to ask you a couple of questions about that, but maybe
Mm.
you can tell that story, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So my history with religion and church is like my mom grew up Catholic from Brazil, and my dad grew up Irish Catholic in the U.S. And when he and my mom got together, they started going to a Presbyterian church, like Protestant church. And so I was raised in that church until I was like 8 or 9. Never really paid attention. I knew the regular Adam and Eve stories. I knew the flood stories. I knew all the stuff that you learn as a kid, but I didn't understand the true essence of God. I didn't understand the like weight of the salvation of Christ and that sort of thing, obviously. And so when my parents split up when I was 9 years old, I stopped going to church because they stopped going to church. And then right around the time when I was 11, 12, um, I started skateboarding, and there was a skate park inside of a church close by my house
Wow.
that it was like a youth center that they would let kids come skate for an hour. And then you have to go to a church service for an hour and then do Bible study for an hour. And then you can skate again for another hour. And so it's this thing that they would do 2, 3 times a week. And so we would go literally to church 3 times a week. And I'm blessed beyond belief that God put me in that situation, because I would have never gone if I couldn't skate for a couple hours a day, And it's like I'm telling my parents I'm going to church. So it's
Yeah.
great. So uh, while I was at this church, it's called Hope Chapel. It's here in Manhattan Beach. It's not there anymore, but it used to be. And when I was going to this church, I was learning so many things that I couldn't possibly wrap my head around.
Mm.
And it was sort of, it was, sorry, I'm like thinking about all this noise that's happening behind me now.
That's
But
fine. That's fine.
yeah, you can't hear it too hard.
No.
It's okay. Okay. So, yeah, so that's what made me start questioning everything, because I always had this sort of very soft belief of like, yeah, I know God, he's the Father, and Jesus is the Son, and he died for my sins, and now I'm saved. The very fundamental things. But then once I started going to this church 3 times a week and hearing all of these different things, all of these different bits of scripture, because, you read a Bible verse, you could take it in any sort of context you want, and it's going to like rattle your brain. You're like, what are you talking about? You know? And a lot of Jesus's teachings are very hard, and they don't make sense to you when you're 13 or 14 years old. And so I started really struggling with this stuff. I was like, this is the God that I believe in. This is the, like, I didn't, a lot of it was hard. A lot of it sounded like not good. And
Yeah.
so I had a hard time with it. And so then I started saying, oh, I don't necessarily know if I believe in God. I don't really know this because the Bible said, and I'm like, well, does the Bible say that? Like, I don't actually know. I've never read the Bible. I've only heard other people read it to me. So then when I was 18, I decided I was going to start reading the Bible. And I started with Genesis, and I thought it was great. And then I got to Numbers, and then I was like, okay, this is too much. I can't do this anymore. I put the Bible down. A couple months later, 2019, my dad died very suddenly. And it was just a very, it was a very life altering moment. It kind of just turned everything upside down for me. My dad was like my best friend, and I sought comfort in the Bible. Something about it was just calling to me, and I know that I needed to rely on God's presence a lot because I felt very lonely in that time, and this was one of the only things that gave me comfort. And like God gave us
Yeah.
a book to read for those times, you know. So I started in the New Testament. I started reading Matthew through Revelation, Mark through Revelation. And then when I went back and started the Old Testament again, everything made sense to me. Like to some degree, you have to read the Bible
Yeah.
15 million times, but first time around it was pretty good. I read it all in about 9 months, and it just completely changed everything for me. When I finished reading the Bible, that was when I finished my firefighting job. I quit that job, came home. That's when I started school, and that was kind of like the beginning of this sort of search for truth for me, starting in the Bible and then trying to see what else out there I believe and what matches up and what I can do away with and what I can keep and that sort of thing. But I think that belief in God, that belief in the Creator, who is a Father who loves us, I think is one of those core beliefs that I've never lost, and I've never found anything to contradict that truth.
That's beautiful. I feel like, um, yeah, man. Like, first of all, that's an inspiring story because I feel like going. I mean, it connects to what we were saying about
Mm-hmm.
suffering and how suffering is like part of like the way you grow, right?
Yes,
But
I would have
it's
never
a
gone down that path if my dad didn't die.
yeah.
It's weird to say that, but
Yeah, and I loved how you phrase it, like the search for the truth. Like, how's that going? What have you figured out so far that has helped you?
I think the one thing that has helped me is being able to step away from the ways that God gets taught in a very sort of sterile environment. Like, you know, you go to, if you go to one church, they're going to tell you God is one way. If you go to another church, they're going to tell you God is another way, but they're always going to compartmentalize it typically in this very Bible based way. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's good. I think that the Bible is necessary. I think it's inerrant. I think it's the word of God. That's what I personally believe. But I think that there are so many things beyond the Bible that we can glean truth from that are compatible that aren't necessarily heretical. I remember I was reading this book called The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. It's an incredible book if anybody wants to read it. But if you were to show like a Bible-based Christian this book, they would think it was directly from Satan himself. Like it is the most heretical thing you've ever read because it essentially shows that God was always present throughout all of written history and all of civilization. And throughout history, we have represented God in different ways, and we have told his story in different ways using different figures. Like one of the things I could tell you straight up is like it talks about how the Nephilim, the giants from the Old Testament, are the demigods and gods from Greek mythology. That they're the same thing. The giants in the Bible are the Greek gods.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that, and I'm like, whoa, like
What?
that. No, that can't be true because it can't be because
Yeah.
they're incompatible, right? But then you look into it, and it's like I know it's just a guy writing a book, but he connects it in such a way where it's like, why can't that be true? Why not? What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it. Um, it's this idea that like all these things can be compatible, and there can still be an ultimate truth about God that's non-heretical. And I think I've said that word 6 times. I think it gets thrown around way too much, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing. Is like if something resonates and there's grains of truth to it, I think that there could be an ultimate truth with a capital T.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely some part of it is the grains of truth where you're like, because it's part of like going through something and like you go through a book and you're like, okay, maybe not all of it resonates, or maybe not all of it is true,
Right.
but there's crumbles in here that I can get. And I feel like people expect one thing where basically truth like is in there, like, oh, this is the one thing, and it's like, no, you can grasp truth in so many different ways. It's like I remember when I started working in this company called the Socratic Experience. uh, I was talking with the founder, Michael, and it was saying, well, one of the things I really want is to make sure that the students that we work with pursue the truth, the good, and the beautiful.
Yeah, love it.
And I was like, yeah, those three things are amazing. And but the thing is, you can find truth, good, and beautiful in so many different things, right?
Yes.
And so it's almost like what matters is the search for the crumbles or the small elements of those three things in whatever you have access to. And you won't
Yeah,
find like truth in one book or beauty in one painting. You'll find it across all of them, and it's almost like your job, quote unquote, is to fine tune your senses and your mind to notice it as much as possible.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's like it's that sort of thing that I'm talking about, where there's a lot of Christians that, if, like I said, if it's not in the Bible, they will not believe it. And not only that, they won't even pay mind to it. They won't give it the time of day. And I just think that you are limiting yourself so much. Like, God put himself in the Bible, but you don't think that he put himself in every other thing around you?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much that you can glean, and also from other people's stories too. Like, that's why I think that the Orthodox Church is so interesting. Catholicism too, because they have this sort of reverence of church fathers, like the people who came before them, who studied all the scriptures and interpret it in such a way that maybe you're not capable of yet, because you're only on your fifth reading of it while they're on their 100th. You know what I mean? And it's those sorts of things where it's like, it's not the Bible, so a lot of churches are going to have a hard time. They don't think reading church fathers
Good
is
idea.
a good idea. But
Yeah.
it is kind of wild to me. I don't know, like, I don't know what life would be like if I were to just pick one book one way and just be like, that's everything. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
No, I don't have to look any further.
I think it ties once again to how do you deal with uncertainty? Because I feel like if you're
Mm-hmm.
grabbing one thing, like it's okay, I got the full package. This is everything that I have to do, and
Yeah,
I don't have to deal with the uncertainty of maybe there's a little bit of
yeah.
truth in there or a little bit of truth in there. Right? It's like
It's
okay, this is
definitely
the
a
plan.
defense mechanism. It's for safety for sure, because if you have one thing and you're like, this is true, nobody take it away
Yeah,
from me. I'm fine. I don't need anything else. You're protecting yourself from harm, from uncertainty, because uncertainty is scary, but
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
necessary. It's that fear that causes us to grow, that causes us to search for more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like part of my relationship with uncertainty changed when I was actually studying jazz, where you're improvising, and so when you're improvising, you have no idea what's going to happen
Yeah.
next. It's
Uh
like,
huh.
oh, okay, interesting. So I've learned how to deal with uncertainty in those cases, and now I'm way more comfortable in dealing with uncertainty in this context here. Oh, interesting, because and
Yes.
I feel like because that's something that you need to work on. I believe. I don't think that I think maybe some of us are more open to being comfortable in uncertainty, but I would say
Hmm.
that still, if you still have like this openness in the beginning, you still need to work on being comfortable around chaos, right?
It's yeah. It's that high risk, high reward thing that we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
When you're
Yeah.
improvising, because I've been there, I've been on stage and somebody forgets how to play a song and you just have to improvise. Or sometimes we'll just, like, somebody starts playing something and then you just play along with it. It turns into a 3 minute jam on stage. The crowd thinks it's planned. They don't understand that we're up here, like, I have no fucking idea what's going to happen
Yeah.
next. And it's those things that create, like, the greatest outcomes. That's the best song you're going to play,
Yeah.
because it was purely from, like, the creative energy of the
Yeah.
collective, There nothing
Yeah.
was planned about it, nothing was normal about it, but it's very risky because it could go entirely wrong. But if it works out, it's greater than anything else.
Absolutely. That's why I love conversations. I've spoken about this before, like where I think there's this direct relationship between conversations and playing in a jazz band or improvising a song,
So
regardless
yeah.
of music in
Hmm.
general. And I feel like there's a couple of elements that are common, and that's why when I'm doing these interviews, like I do some research, but I don't want to have like 20 questions that I'm just going over and that's it, or like I'm not
Yeah.
aiming at making like that one specific question that's going to be awesome and it's going to get a lot of clicks. It's like no, I want to have a basis so we can like have a chat and have a conversation and get to know each other and get to know our worldviews. But then I want to let it flow because the best moments are going to be like a lot of questions that I just asked you. I had no idea that I was going to ask you, and those were like
Yeah.
one of some of the highlights so far. And so I feel
Right.
like being able to navigate that chaos. Like there's a book called Fire in the Dark by Jack Donovan, and Jack is he's a controversial figure. He has a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas. Some of them I agree, some of them I don't. But like in this book, he's telling you about he's the relationship between chaos and order, and how
Hmm.
we as men are want to aim at being able to go into chaos and be comfortable in chaos so we can make order out of it. And I feel like
Right.
a lot of people just think, well, if I go to chaos, I'll succumb to it. I won't be able to deal with it. But if you're able to work on that, if you're able to work on being comfortable in chaos, in uncertainty, not knowing, that's what makes you risk things and be able to actually bring order. And once again, we get
Hmm.
to that point of high risks, high rewards, right? Where you're able to like bring order into your life. I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Because if you don't allow yourself that risk, then life's stagnant. You're never going to achieve anything greater than, what your mind has governed you to, you know?
yeah, which is why, which is where I feel a lot of people are
Hmm.
due to maybe a lack of confidence or lack of faith or whatever. Where they're like, well,
Yes.
but
It's
if I give
that and
this,
it's, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no, it's just like, okay, if I give this extra step, like I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I just won't do it.
Right. Exactly. And it's that it's not only a lack of confidence, but I think it's that lack of drive because our world, like I said, like we were talking about in Hollywood, how Hollywood is just watering down these heroes and these myths and not making them as great, and they're just more human and they're more mundane. The same thing is happening to like our food supply. They're causing the food supply to be shittier so
Yeah,
that there's less nutrition, so that you don't feel as good, so that you just sort of like lack the energy and the motivation to do greater things. And it's
yeah,
it's the programming, it's the food, it's this, it's that, it's like it's all these things that are culminating in trying to just keep you comfortable where you are and also incapable of going anywhere else anyway, so you might as well just stay where you are.
exactly. Yeah, definitely. On that note, I think that it's we can do a good segue into like the place where we met, like the Twitter space that we
Hmm.
inhabit. And
Yeah.
I want to know, like, how did you ended up on Twitter, and how would you describe the space where you are right now?
Yeah, the short answer is soul bra.
Okay.
Um, but the long answer is back when COVID started in 2020, I was sitting around at home a lot, and I would spend a lot of time just hanging out in my backyard, working out, um, not training hard enough, but working out and not eating very well, but like dieting. You know what I mean? So I was like doing all the sort of like basic stuff. I was doing the
Hmm.
regular like 3 day a week bodybuilding split and eating my chicken, rice, and broccoli and just trying to like, do that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And it wasn't until I came across this guy's Instagram. I was scrolling on Instagram one day in my backyard. Like I remember it vividly because it was a big moment for me. And I came across this photo of I think it was Hercules or something. It was some Greek statue, and it was like average man before seed oils. And I was like, what the fuck is a seed oil? I had no idea. And so then I clicked on the guy's account, and I don't even know if he's still around. Honestly, his name now is Flo Modus, but back then it was something else. Or maybe I have it backwards, and it was Flo Modus, and now it's something else. But when I clicked on his account, I followed him, and it shows you recommended people, and the first person who popped
Yeah.
up was Solbra. So I clicked on Solbra, consumed all of his content because it was just mesmerizing to me, and then I just was a follower for a long time. And then when he started Soul Club back in 2020, like end of 2021, I joined right away, and he posted one day, like in the Discord, hey, everybody, go, if you don't have Twitter, go create a Twitter page. Let's all follow each other and just put a sun next to your name so that we know like
Yeah.
you're in Soul Club. Like we'll recognize each
Yeah.
other. It's a little. And so I did that, and immediately like Soulbra follows me on Twitter. So then when other people come to my page, they see, oh, Soulbra's following him. My Twitter grew like pretty instantaneously, and then it was so cool because I had this like almost immediate access to an incredible community of people who are like-minded, think like me, and I can become friends with instantly. And that's how
Yeah.
I've met so many of my like best friends today. And that's how we met. And Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what it was. Soulbra literally said, "Get on Twitter," and then I got on Twitter, and since then, like him and I have met up a couple times. We're good friends, and yeah, it's very cool. It's just this like one random day I was scrolling Instagram, saw a post I didn't
Yeah.
understand, and it changed my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like what I really enjoy about Twitter is that so everyone keeps saying about how awful being on the internet is, like, oh, and people like are hating on everything that you do, and like even on Twitter I remember people being screaming that Twitter was so bad, it was like this the worst social media ever, and why
Mm-hmm.
the fuck would anyone be there. And I was having a blast, and
A
look, I
blast,
have
the
a
best
very
time.
small account. Yeah, absolutely, I have a very small account. I'm not like, but I was enjoying everyone that I was meeting. And I was always having that conversation. I was like, well, if you don't like your experience, that's probably because you're following the wrong people. But
Right?
no, no, it's about the platform and the way they're doing stuff. And I was like,
No, it's not.
why?
It's
Like,
so curative. You can curate your experience to be however you want. You can block anyone. You can mute
absolutely,
anything. You can mute keywords. You can just go on there if you're like, I don't want to ever hear anything that has the word news in it. You can block the word news from your feed. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So it's a skill issue. If you, I remember my girlfriend, my roommate and his girlfriend got into a fight one time because she was like, I gotta delete social media because it's toxic. And he was like, well, that, isn't that kind of like your fault, if your social media is toxic? And it got a huge argument. But it was
yeah,
it was one of those things that really
it
made
is.
me think like, yeah, I've never had a problem with social media. I mean, like you can definitely, especially with stuff like TikTok, where it's harder to curate that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Like you can get sucked into the doom scrolling, and it's still possible on Twitter, but it is a skill issue. You just have to have that sort of conscientiousness to understand that you are going on there to improve your life in some way. And I think that that's
absolutely.
one of the best things that like, because when I started Twitter, I was just telling you I just did it so that I could be part of a community of people. I never had the intention of creating anything. But when I realized that creation is like the antithesis to consumption, then I was like, I'm going to have a more productive, better time on social media if I'm creating. So then I started
Mm,
posting tweets, and then I started posting videos, and I started posting photos. And
yeah,
immediately I started getting a lot of really positive feedback. And I also realized like my my experience here is becoming better not only because I'm curating better, but because I'm creating and consuming less. Like when I open Twitter, my first thought is, what am I going to talk about today? What am I going to tweet? And it's the same for TikTok. I had TikTok for a long time, and like I didn't ever want to post because I'm like, oh, TikTok is,
yeah,
it's not the platform for me. Like, it's just for dancing and stuff. But then I started seeing some really cool creators on TikTok, and I was like, I kind of want to emulate that. I started
mm,
posting my own videos, and so now it's like, I probably spend 30 minutes, an hour a day on TikTok, but all I'm doing is creating. Like I hardly ever scroll on it anymore because I have this, it's exciting to me. It's like fun, to get the
yeah,
feedback and to be able to share ideas with people and the
yeah,
discourse. It's like, it's great. You can reach so many people in such a small amount of time. It's
absolutely.
as far as growth goes, like if you're a creator, and I know that
It's the
people
one
don't like
platform.
TikTok, but
Mm,
it's the one where if you're trying to grow, that's the
yeah,
place. I've had people that I used to work with or old classmates sending me my own TikToks back and being like, you popped up on my page today. And I'm like, yeah, it's
yeah,
incredible. Like you just
yeah.
anybody could see it.
Absolutely. Well, Jonas, I mean, this was amazing. I just have one more question before we wrap this up. So the
Sure.
podcast is called Limbo because look, so for a while I've tried to have all of these different podcasts and all of these different ideas, but I always try to compartmentalize them. So, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to create a podcast about this, so I can only talk about people that are. And so,
Hmm.
eventually, I was talking with the restaurant owner that I was mentioning, the
Oh, cool.
Portuguese actor, yeah, and
Yeah.
he has a restaurant called Limbo. And
Okay.
I was we were talking about like why did you call it that? And he was saying that it's like you never know what's going to happen here. And I was like, oh, I want that. That's the vibe I want for a podcast.
Yeah.
Let me ask you: have you ever been in a limbo in your life, or you don't like you have no idea like what's going to happen? And if so, like how did you get out of there?
Yeah, the first limbo that I would say I was in my life was that time that I was telling you when I quit my firefighting job, moved back
Yeah,
home to go to school for a degree that I had no idea what I was going to do with, and just absolutely had no direction. Like I want to
yeah,
say from I quit that job in October, uh, and I went to Brazil in late December. It wasn't until January I had that conversation. So for like a solid 3 months. I was really floating around, grasping at straws, trying to figure out like, what am I gonna say I'm doing with my life? What do I care about? What do I
yeah,
love? And I think God blessed me by giving me this girl who just gave me an idea that I said, yeah, I
yeah,
trust you. That actually sounds like a great idea. And then I went and pursued it.
yeah,
Um, that's probably like the greatest limbo I ever faced in my life. And
yeah.
um, we talked a little bit earlier about this sort of bout of chronic pain that I was experiencing
Oh
from
yeah,
last May to this January. That entire 7 month period felt like limbo because it was such a life altering experience. Like we don't need to go super in depth, but when I was in May, I developed this like chronic neck and back pain out of nowhere. And I thought it was because I trained too hard one day, but it wouldn't go away for weeks and weeks. And I got to the point where I went and saw a doctor, and I never go to the doctor. And I got x-rays and I got an MRI, like all these things. And they were like, nothing is structurally wrong with you. Like I had a nerve injury in my neck 2 years ago, but it wasn't because of that at all. It was all over my neck and back. It moved and it changed. And it was like this debilitating pain that caused me to do more poorly in school, not work out. I had like no motivation to go and like hang out with my friends. I literally didn't want to do anything other than lay in bed. And it was like
yeah,
ruining me. And it wasn't until I met my buddy, Michael Amons, who became my chronic pain coach and was able to like help me work through these things and realize that it was a matter of stored emotional trauma.
yeah,
And then I finally started working through the emotions and the trauma and that stuff. But for 7 months, I literally felt like a ghost, just kind of floating around. I wasn't posting on Twitter. I wasn't posting on TikTok. I wasn't taking auditions. Like I wasn't acting as much. I was going to class. Like my whole life just got put on pause, and that's one of the things that I think I've been trying to like work back through lately. And I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. Like this is a very fun experience that for me because
absolutely.
I've been talking a lot to one of my friends, Zach Shankin. He's got another podcast, The Vitruvian Man, that I went on a little while ago. And he has been an incredible help through all this because I got to talk to him a lot about like what I was going through and like how I feel like I haven't like made progress and I've stagnated and my identity feels different. And he's like got a lot of really good information after we had a conversation one time. Actually, he like posted an entire podcast about our conversation. But yeah, having friends like that, like Michael, like Zach, like you and people like in this space that kind of helped me out of it, like putting me in a good emotional state, and allowing me to like work through these things. And yeah, but so we're kind of back on the right track now and things are getting better. So
Absolutely, man. That was such a good answer. Okay, so if people want to follow you, like, where should they meet you?
yeah, so it's just my name, Jonas Kilker, on all platforms. Um, and yeah, I it's funny because I with my personal brand and everything, like it's just me. I'm not necessarily selling any program or anything myself.
Yeah,
My buddy Andrew and I have a company called Bubba's Natural Products. It's this sunblock that we've created, and we're planning on creating a couple other products soon. We have like a soap and a lip balm coming out soon, so you guys can be on the lookout for that. It's Bubba's Natural Products.
yeah,
Small company. We're still growing. We're still figuring it out, and it probably won't be our only company as we're just like figuring out all the. We're learning. None of us went to
yeah,
school for this, so.
yeah,
But yeah, other than that, hopefully, I've got a couple. I've got a couple cool gigs coming up, acting wise. That the shitty thing about acting is you won't be able to see it for a couple of years once it's
yeah.
started. But you know, at some point,
But we will be on the lookout for that, and of course, we'll
absolutely.
post all of the links for that, and maybe we'll do an episode 2 just talking about your entrepreneurial journey. it sounds like a good shout out.
Yeah,
That being
absolutely.
said, Jonas, this was amazing. To everyone watching, go follow Jonas, and yeah, and maybe leave a like and a review of the podcast in your favorite podcast platform. I'll see you all here in the next episode. Bye bye, everyone.